Van Dickens here, pastor of the Monroe United Methodist Church. Welcome to this time of Bible study. Let's pray together. Gracious Lord, we thank you for your goodness and for opportunities to show that goodness in the words we say, the things we do. May your ultimate goodness prevail as we strive to be your people in these perplexing days. Grant your mercy on all who face illness, affliction, injustice, and uncertainty. May your light outshine the darkness, for we pray in Jesus' name. Amen. So we are still in the in Paul's letter to Romans, and we've gotten up to midway through chapter 8. I want to remember that the overarching theme, if you've been following along in the study, has to do with God's righteousness and how that impacts us, and how are we considered righteousness, we who strive for salvation. We pick up then in chapter 8, verse 26, as he continues on. And right at this point, he is speaking, to those who are facing troubled times and trying to understand where is their place, speaking to many of the Gentiles in Rome who are trying to live a godly life, trying to be Christians, and are faced with the stiff resistance by Rome itself, by the very government of Rome, who think of them as an alien religion, atheists to the gods of Rome. And they're not feeling all that strong. They don't have any standing in Rome. And Paul picks up in chapter 8, verse 26. Likewise, the Spirit helps us in our weakness, for we do not know how to pray as we ought. But that very Spirit intercedes with sighs too deep for words. And God, who searches the heart, knows what is the mind of the Spirit, because the Spirit intercedes for the saints according to the will of God. So God here is praying for people who don't know what to say, don't know how to pray in the light of the calamities that they are facing. And he's telling them basically, don't worry about the words. The words will come. Sometimes there are no great words. Sometimes it's a sigh. Have you ever been there? Have you ever been asked to pray, and the reality of what is going on, the thing for which you have been asked to pray, is so big that you don't know what to say? What is there to say? I've been in that situation too many times in the light of the death of someone that I personally knew and loved, and then I'm in the midst of the family who are in the throes of grief. And sometimes all I can say begins with a sigh or a tear. And at that moment I realized that it's not all that important, the right words, the correct words, as much as it is communication of God's love, and sometimes the communication of God's grief in the midst of that terrible situation. That's where God is with the person who is grieving or struggling or trying to find an answer in a situation. It's acknowledging that sometimes the Spirit moves in ways that go beyond human words. I remember a number of years ago it's not necessarily during times of grief, but it does come to mind. There was a funeral many years ago, and we were conducting a funeral, and one of the ministers there decided, since he didn't have opportunity to offer a homily, that he would give a very significant prayer. And so he began to pray, and he prayed and he prayed and he prayed, and it lasted 15 minutes. And at the end of the prayer, people were tired. They were weary. And the whole service was not supposed to be much more than 20 minutes. And here he had been praying for 15 minutes. He'd forgotten about why he was there, and it just became sort of a self-absorbed, endless words. Is that what people need at that time? Well, maybe not. Maybe sometimes the best thing is not so much the words that are said, but the fact that you are there as a sign that they are not alone, and that God is there with them. Some of my most scary times in my life, I've been in more than one automobile wreck. Those of you who know me know that I have a history. When I was quite young, I was not the best driver. I'm a lot better now, and anyway, there were times when I saw the collision, it was coming, and you don't have time to pray a long, lengthy prayer. All I could say was, "Oh God," or "God help me," and my prayers were answered, as short as they were. Sometimes you and I are asked to pray for an occasional regular purpose, such as a blessing before a meal, or for some other reason, and the words get caught in our throat, and we get tongue-tied or embarrassed, and then we vow, well, I will never pray again. I'll never put myself in this situation. I hope that's not the case. I hope that you allow yourself time to think about what you want to say and say it. And it could be 2 or 3 words. It could be longer than that. But I think everyone should have the privilege of finding ways of praying, not on your own, by your own ability, but by stopping long enough and listening to the Spirit, who will prompt you and give you whatever words are fitting for the occasion. I would much rather listen to the prayer of someone who I know in my heart is a sincere, good, God-fearing person. They may not have much of a gift in words, but I know that when I hear that prayer from them, it is from the heart, and it's better than anything that anybody else could say. So that's what I think about when I think of that passage from Paul. It's anybody can, package a bunch of words and put them together, but it takes someone who listens to the Spirit of God, whose prayer is from the heart and from the Spirit. So that's what I think about. Romans 8, verse 26. He goes on in verse 28. He writes, "We know that all things work together for good for those who love God." And I didn't want to overlook that. That's a very well-known passage of Paul's. For good for those who love God, who are called according to his purpose. For those whom he foreknew, he also predestined to be conformed to the image of his Son, in order that he might be the firstborn within a large family. And those whom he predestined, he also called. And those whom he called, he also justified. And those whom he justified, he also glorified. Here Paul talking about God's will, about good that is going to come. Now, it doesn't mean that good is happening right in that moment, but is talking about how eventually God's will, which is always good, will ultimately weave a tapestry that will show that goodness. Leslie Weatherhead once wrote a book, The Will of God, and in it he talks about three different ways of looking at God's will. One is intentional, the other is circumstantial, and the other is ultimate. The intentional, that first one, is when we intentionally choose to walk in God's ways, when we say yes to God and we strive to live a godly life through the grace of God, of course. But that's in our intentional. It is our intent to walk in His ways. When people who make a profession of faith, or an adult who is baptized, part of that baptismal covenant is that voice of intentionality. I intend to walk in God's ways. Or if we baptize an infant, the parents are asked, is it your intention to lead that child in the grace of God? Are you going to be intentional about that? Meaning that you're not going to be haphazard. You're not going to just never see to it that that child is brought to the love of God through the disciplines of faith, including going to church, learning about God, and through studying the Bible, through prayer, etc. Those are all intentional ways. The second is circumstantial, wherein he means that there's a circumstantial will that God has established through the basic laws of nature, the forces of nature, gravity, things like that. All the celestial bodies and how the world works, the speed of light, things like that. They behave according to the way God has established it. Now, it doesn't mean that bad things don't ever happen, or unfortunate events never happen. A wall falls and several people are killed, or a disease happens and it threatens many lives. Things like that happen. It is not to mean that there's never going to be times of trouble in a variety of circumstances, but still there are certain laws, certain fundamental things that are fixed, that follow a basic will of God. Then there's the third, that ultimate will of God, that even the circumstantial things, even when trouble happens, our intentions to walk in God's ways, when we fail in those intentions, that there's a third component, that ultimate will of God, that eventually, the world as we know it will be a world of peace. Well, maybe not the world as we know it, but the world as God envisions it will be filled with peace, with love, with compassion. And Jesus talks about that in terms of the kingdom of God, that when that kingdom comes into its fullness, there we will find the ultimate will of God. And that's what Paul means when he says, we know that all things, in verse 28, all things work together for good for those who love God. That maybe not necessarily right in the moment, the circumstances are showing this. Maybe not as you have tried to walk in God's ways and you messed up, but ultimately all things work together for good, because that is God's will. That is God's will. That is God's way of showing God's righteousness. It would be a pretty bad state of affairs if in the end time everything looks in shambles. That wouldn't be showing God's ultimate will. But why is he saying this here? Why is Paul talking about this at this point in time? He goes on and says, for those whom he foreknew, he also predestined to be conformed to the image of his Son. Why is he saying this here? Ultimately, he's saying those who love God, backing up a little bit, Paul's theology is that, first of all, everyone is called. Everyone, the whole human race is called to God. But then there are those who hear that call. And so he's saying those who love, for those who love God, in other words, those who have heard the call and have listened to it, will be conformed to Christ. If you've heard the call of the gospel, and have listened to it and have begun to turn in that direction, then you will be conformed to Christ. All who love God and who hear this gospel message, it will lead them to Christ, like water that flows to the ocean. All who love God, who begin that journey of faith, they will be led to Christ. They will be led to be conformed in the manner of Jesus. They will begin to reflect his image. That's what he's talking about when he's talking about those whom he foreknew, he also predestined. If you've been called, if you have heard the gospel message and you respond to it, then it is predestined that you are going to reflect the image of Christ. Now, it's very important that we understand what Paul is saying here and what he's not saying here, because I know that there's a lot of theological discussion about predestination and God's foreknowledge, and it's the subject of more than one reason why you have one kind of church and another kind of church, one who leans in one way and one who leans in the other way. It's important as we look at verses 28 through 30, what he is saying, what he's not saying. What he is saying is that those who heed God's call, in other words, the gospel, become part of the covenant. They become like Christ. For those who respond, their future becomes predestined. What he is not saying is that he's not saying that it's fate, that we don't have a choice in the matter. He is saying that those who heed God's word will be led down a specific path after the example in the person of Christ, and not some other path, if that makes any sense. It's like all roads lead to Rome. In Paul's theology, all who love God are led to the cross. That's the predestined road for those who love God and who hear the gospel message. And that then leads us to verse 31. Many were concerned in his day that this Christian pilgrimage, this specific Christian path, was heading them to a precipice, to a cliff, because they were seeing people being executed, tortured, beaten, fed to the lions, sawn in half, things like that, for walking that path. And Paul is responding to that and saying, no, take heart, keep your faith. The hope that you have in Christ is not a vain hope. In these present times, yes, you may suffer. That is not God's ultimate will, to borrow from Leslie Weatherhead. Keep the faith, and your glorification, your complete salvation will be waiting for you in God's predestined future for you. All right. So that hopefully that helps a little bit in our understanding of predestination and free will. We are predestined into the likeness of Christ for those who love God. But always you have that. Doesn't say that you don't have free will. Okay. Then we get into chapter 9, 10, and 11, where Paul is addressing the elephant in the room. The elephant being the fact that many of his fellow Israelites, many Jews, rejected Jesus, whereas the Gentiles were flocking to him. So he treats that. He said, okay, then let's give this a fair understanding. Chapters 9, 10, and 11 talks about God's plan for all creation, including Gentile and Jew, including Israel. The prevailing thought, and in Paul's early ministry, and in all of the early Christians, all of the apostles in their early ministry, the common presumption was that this message was meant for God's chosen people. And even Jesus himself made it clear throughout his ministry that he came first for the Jews. And so all thought that salvation would first come to the Jews and then to all the nations. And in early Jewish literature in the Old Testament, we find that Israel is a chosen nation as a light, and then other nations will come around, and then other nations. But Paul is pointing out a very unusual fact. He's pointing out that God doesn't always work that way. God doesn't always work in the way that we would expect. Oftentimes God reverses things for reasons that are it's God's it's a mystery that only God understands, and that's not unprecedented. Throughout Jewish literature, you see where God turns things upside down. You would think that Esau would have been the favored son, and Jacob would serve Esau, Jacob being the younger son, but the roles are reversed, and the elder serves the younger. And this happens all throughout. And that is Paul, uses that insight to understand the reality of his own Christian missionary experience. He first goes to the Jews, he goes to the synagogues, and every time he goes, a few believe, and then a lot of them kick him out and give him a lot of trouble, beat him, mistreat him, and sometimes he has to flee for his life. Eventually he gets arrested, but then once he has done that, he goes and preaches to whoever will listen to him, including Gentiles. And before long, he finds that he has a bigger audience with the Gentiles than he does with the Jews. Reversal. So he's thinking about this theologically now. What is he to make of this in chapters 9, 10, and 11? And in chapter 9, verse 6, let's take a look. It is not as though the word of God had failed, for not all Israelites truly belong to Israel, and not all of Abraham's children are his true descendants. But it is through Isaac that descendants shall be named for you. This means that it is not the children of the flesh who are the children of God, but the children of the promise that are counted as descendants. So Paul is here making it clear that not everyone who declares, well, I'm a child of Abraham, I'm a son of Abraham, I'm a daughter of Abraham, is part of the covenant, but the ones who, like Abraham, trust God through faith. Trust God through faith. And that faith reckons the believer as righteous, whether that person is a Jew from flesh descendants or if they are a non-Jew. So that's the point he's making. Not everyone who comes from the 12 tribes is part of Abraham's children, but the ones who believe in God i.e. believe in the one whom God has sent. And then in chapter 9, verse 30, he comes back to the theme of righteousness. Let's take a look. What then are we to say? Gentiles who did not strive for righteousness have attained it, that is, righteousness through faith. But Israel, who did strive for the righteousness that is based on the law, did not succeed in fulfilling the law. Why not? Because they did not strive for it on the basis of faith, but as if it were based on works. They've stumbled over the stumbling stone. So that's his understanding of how this came about. He's saying that all, Jew and Greek, who strive to be righteous, strive to follow God, strive to be saved, do so through faith, whether you're Jew or Gentile, and that those who strive to do it on their own merit by adhering to the law, to the letter of the law. Look at me, I got all the laws right today. Who try to do it on their own merit, they stumble. I want to say a little bit ahead of time, we'll get to this in a minute, that doesn't mean that they have forever stumbled, but it means that right here at this point they've stumbled, and their stumbling becomes an occasion for Gentiles to hear and receive the good news. But ultimately, for both Jew and Gentile. Watch Paul here. One would think Paul's theology dismisses Israel if you just read up to this point and left it at that. But that's not so. Even though many Jews of Paul's day did reject Jesus, Paul never sees his own people as being outcasts. That's very important to understand. In chapter 10 and 11, he makes it clear that the salvation of God is for all people. Now, I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time in chapter 10, but it leads up to the argument that we find in chapter 11, where in chapter 11, God foreknew Israel, speaking to the Gentiles who think they may now have a special status over and against Israel. He makes it very clear. In 11 verse 1, I ask then, has God rejected his people? By no means. I myself am an Israelite, a descendant of Abraham, member of the tribe of Benjamin. God has not rejected his people whom he foreknew. Do you not know what the scripture says of Elijah, how he pleads with God against Israel? Lord, they have killed your prophets. They have demolished your altars. I alone am left. They are seeking my life. But what is the divine reply to him? I have kept for myself 7,000 who have not bowed the knee to Baal. So he's saying regarding Israel that, yes, there have been a number who have rejected God's offer through Christ, but that doesn't mean that Israel is lost. There is always the remnant of Israel, and that is their hope, and that's the mystery. Salvation of the Gentiles begins as even though the Jews were first offered this and many rejected, now the opportunity has come to the Gentiles. That's the reversal that we're seeing. We pick up in chapter 11, verse 11. Hear this. So I ask, have they stumbled so as to fall? By no means. But through their stumbling, salvation has come to the Gentiles, so as to make Israel jealous. Now, if their stumbling means riches for the world, and if their defeat means riches for Gentiles, how much more will their full inclusion mean? So when you read that, there is no way you can conclude that God has dismissed or rejected or outcast Israel. By no way. And I love the way Paul says it. They have stumbled. From a Christian point of view, someone who is from the the Jewish faith who doesn't claim Christ, doesn't receive Christ, it is to be considered that as a stumbling of some sort, because this is the God of Abraham that we as Christians are talking about, who has revealed himself ultimately through Christ. And the fact that a Jew may not come to that point, we would say that's a stumbling. But according to Paul, it's not a stumble as to fall. In other words, you're down, but you have not stumbled to where you're not in the race anymore. No, Paul says, by no means. How much more, if by their stumbling others come into the fold, how much more will their full inclusion ultimately be? So he sees that God's ultimate purpose is not to exclude, but to include as many as possible. In this case, Gentiles. All non-Jews are now coming in a strange, mysterious role reversal. And then eventually the hope is that all of Israel will come to the understanding of God's great love, of Abraham's God, the God of great love, through what Christ has offered. And then he turns to the Gentiles that he is writing to and is reminding them, therefore, don't get a big head about this. Don't think that you are better than them. And this profound truth is missed historically. And a lot of bad theology was used. I'm thinking Nazi Germany. A lot of bad theology was written about the Jews as being the murderers of Jesus, and that they just the very thought of that theology is revolting to me. Paul is very clear that God's heart is longing for the eventual full salvation of all people, Jew and Gentile. And then he turns to these Gentiles who may have thought, well, we are now the chosen people, and they aren't. And he says in verse 21 of chapter 11, for if God did not spare the natural branches, perhaps he will not spare you. Talking about the Gentiles. Note then the kindness and the severity of God. Severity towards those who have fallen, but God's kindness toward you. Those of you who have been grafted into the covenant, non-Jews who were grafted into the covenant. But God's kindness toward you, provided you continue in his kindness. Otherwise, you also will be cut off. So it's important for us to see that, even though we will embrace what Paul reduces to a very simple expression of faith, those who believe in the Lord will be saved. Even though we would say that, I believe in the Lord, we are not off the hook. We must continue in God's kindness. We can't behave like heathens and pagans that we used to be. We can't continue doing rotten, dirty things and consider ourselves saved because we said, I believe in the Lord. No, you have to continue in God's kindness. Then he goes on. And even those of Israel, if they do not persist in unbelief, will be grafted in. In other words, those that previously rejected, if they decided, I do believe in the teachings and the words of Christ, they will be grafted in. For God has the power to graft them in again, verse 23. And then verse 24, for if you have been cut from what is by nature a wild olive tree and grafted, contrary to nature, into a cultivated olive tree, how much more will these natural branches, Israel, be grafted back into their own olive tree, so that you may not claim to be wiser than you are, brothers and sisters. I want you to understand this mystery. A hardening has come upon part of Israel, until the full number of Gentiles has come in, and so all Israel will be saved. And it goes on, as regards the gospel, they are enemies of God for your sake, but as regards election, they are beloved for the sake of their ancestors, for the gifts and the calling of God are irrevocable. So we've come a long way in chapter 9, 10, and 11 to understand that God's love is for all, and that God's promise for Israel was never revoked, and that is still God's hope, that they will too be grafted into the entire salvation that is offered through the love that God has shown through Christ. Lots of material here. Remember, all of this that we've studied today, I hope that you remember that your salvation, that your righteousness is a gift. It's a gift that comes from God's grace, and that as God has called you into his loving relationship, that you allow God's Spirit that can give you words to pray when you don't have words of your own, is the same Spirit that gives you the strength to live in the kindness that your faith affords, to walk in his ways, to walk in the will of God, to be intentional about that. And that's how we become righteous, not by our own merits, but through faith and through the grace that God gives us. God bless you in this day that God's made, and I hope you have a wonderful day. Take care. Bye-bye.